Welcome to another edition of Anglican Unscripted. This is episode 918. I'm Kevin Kallsen.
I'm George Conger. Today's June 6th, 2025.
Do this again. I wonder if people really understand how hard it is to put the show together. All right, so 3, 2 is how do you pronounce it? Marcus Andrew? Andrews? Andrew?
Marc Ardus.
Yep. Andrews.
No, us. Marc Ardus.
Andrus, okay. All right, good. 3, 2, 1. This is like our third try in the last 5 minutes to get this show going. I've been talking my head off, and I'm not listening, and we've lost the ability to be fun on TV. We're changing that right now, George. Now, I need to apologize. If you hear a humming in the background, that's the AC. It's hot and humid today in Maryland, and I don't need to suffer, and you don't need to watch me suffer in an uncontrolled, un-AC'd RV. So that's on. George, how you doing today?
Man, I'm living in the past, Kevin. I got to tell you, my age is kicking in. You're going to be 60 years old on Monday. I passed that milestone a long time ago. And it shows that I do nursing home services 3 a week, Eucharists and prayers and singing. A lot of singing, because with older people, you need to sing to get them sort of moving. And I broke one of the cardinal rules of being an Episcopal priest of a conservative bent. And for this, I need to apologize, and perhaps I need to inform the bishop in self-report. But
you broke out the guitar.
Yes, and I led the congregation in singing a Peter, Paul, and Mary song. Weave me the sunshine in the pouring rain. Yes, and the thing is, Kevin, we're now so old that Peter, Paul, and Mary music is the preferred music of choice of contemporary Christian music for our congregation.
Wow.
Forget anything after, forget any 70s Cursillo music or anything like that. We're still in the Peter or Ghost Riders in the Sky, yippee-yi-yay, yippee-yi-yo for our good old cowboy people. So, God has something in store for me, and I will have to spend some time. I understand where Gavin's going with this talk of purgatory, where I need to purge myself of my sin for singing Peter, Paul, and Mary songs during a Christian worship service.
Early in Genesis, we are entitled to learn that God can use evil for good.
And he can use Peter, Paul, and Mary.
Anything's possible. So, on Monday, I turned the big 6-0. Oh, Lord. I didn't see this coming, but now that it's here, oh my Lord! Many our audience are 65 and older, according to the YouTube statistics. So you're like, Kevin, what are you complaining about?
Kevin, when people die, I've got them trained to leave stuff to the church, but they don't leave money. They leave walkers and wheelchairs and porta potties.
Sure.
Hoyer lifts, anything you need, Kevin, in your declining years. I have a whole storage shed filled with every sort of medical equipment that you could want.
Okay.
Rather have the money, but hey, there it is.
I won't have any money when I die. I hope to have spent every last penny, and then it is going to the church, of course. My retirement.
Jill is going to have all the money when you die. Kevin, don't fool yourself. Don't fool yourself. So she's the engineer. She's got the mechanical mind that will plot this out to the last. She's going to tell you when you're allowed to die, I think is how it's going to work.
Oh, absolutely. Now, on Monday, I'm doing what avid cyclists like myself do, bike your age on your birthday. And every year it's getting harder. Last year was 59 miles. Monday, I have to bike 60 miles to bike my age, and I'll leave here at 8 a.m. and probably be back here by 11 or noon. Hopefully it's not hot like today. We shall see. All right, we need to talk about what's going on in the news. And this week, you clicked on Anglican Unscripted without the prompt in the title, Calvin Robinson. Congratulations. This is the week that I promised I would not put him in the title, because I don't want to just use Calvin for clickbait. Not at all.
We should not take Calvin's name in vain.
No, there you go. However, he is the first story. Calvin Robinson's may be given a safe haven in the APA, the Anglican province in America. Robert Giffith, the Bishop of Central and Western States, says he's trying to get Calvin on board. I don't know if it's a paperwork issue, but it hasn't happened yet.
Well, from a bishop's perspective, he has to get his brother bishops sign on the dotted line.
Okay.
And the parish has to agree to it, and Calvin has to agree to it. But really, this is an instance of we seeing God's providence at work here. From out of a darkness and nasty situation, God's joy can be found because Bishop Giffen is acting like a thoughtful bishop. He's personally, if you will, rescuing from ecclesiastical limbo Calvin Robinson, giving him a home. Mm-hmm. But second of all, he is using this to build up the APA's presence and witness and statement. And he's been on Facebook recently, more often than not, talking about the natural links between the APA and the Reformed Episcopal Church, for instance.
Sure.
Both conservative in doctrine, discipline, and both saying no to the ordination of women. And from these talks about can we find a way to have a common pension fund for the disparate continuing
nice.
groups?
Yeah.
In other words, Calvin was the necessary catalyst to shake the dying C4, which is now down to C2, groups into life. Now, people will say who are active, my parish is doing great, or I got a great bishop. I'm not saying you're not, but institutionally and structurally, it wasn't a good time. But I think Calvin is the medicine that the continuing church movement needs in the United States to reignite it. And boy, as Calvin has shown, he can set things on fire. So hopefully he'll set the church on fire with the word of the gospel. Well,
I think the continuing church has kind of recognized, at least since 2017, that they do need to work together and they need each other. And it's very hard for those personalities to come together. I've been subject to one of their meetings in Atlanta, and it's nice to see that happening, if not now, one day soon. So let's move on to some international news. Bishop Fenwick has retired from the fellowship. What is the FCA again?
Free Church of England, FCE.
I'm sorry, yes.
It was Senator Millicent Fenwick from Maine, first woman senator, I think. Millicent Fenwick, but in England, they dropped the W, so they call it Fenwick.
Fenwick, yeah. Okay.
So it's more like the Italian Funiculi, Funicula, like a good old Dean Martin song.
So, well, hold
These were stepped down.
We tortured that so much. Let's do the intro again to two, and this is for the audience. You're going to have to deal with my old age now. Bishop Fenwick has retired from the FCE. He was the primus. His last hurrah was their recent synod, where they confirmed the elections of some assistant bishops and all this and that. There's a great deal of talk on the internet, social media, among conservative Anglicans in the UK about Bishop Fenwick's, and I'm going to be English saying, was not the best way forward for this denomination. They lost about between a half and a third of their decent clergy, sure.
A third of their total clergy. And if you look at each of the individual cases, it comes down to the bishop squishing a vibrant, alive, vital priest. In other words, no competition. The bishop is king, and it's his way, and parishes serve the pleasure of the bishop, which is sort of the exact opposite of what the FCE's whole purpose was, as an evangelical expression of Anglicanism outside of the established church. So he's gone. Is it too late to save the FCE? Well, time will tell. But the people brought in to replace the bishops don't give me confidence, because one is a young man who was very bright, but he has managed to burn every single bridge he has with other conservative Anglicans. And the other fellow strikes me as being amiable, but not someone who could survive Fenwick. Fenwick either needs you as a weapon or he needs you not to be a threat. And so the two people who became bishops, one is non-threatening, and the other is a faithful soldier.
Yeah. Well,
is that the recipe for growth and success?
Well, we shall see. I mean, the FCE was always an alternative to the imposing collapse of the Church of England. Hey, where can I go to find a good evangelical church in England? Because the Church of England is imploding. Well, you go to the FCE. Well, FCE over the last 5 years has turned out not to be that destination to go to. There are other alternatives thanks to GAFCON and the CNA, but I don't know.
Well, for some reason, you look at the United Reformed Church, was the old Methodists and Congregationalists in England formed together. They've gone over the edge. Mm-hmm. They're declining much faster than the Church of England. The FCE is declining much faster than the Church of England. And even though I can point out past FCE clergy, from Jonas Bragatas to Brett Murphy to Calvin Robinson, who are just high flyers, in any denomination would just love somebody like that, they were driven out. Mm-hmm. And what does that tell us about the priorities of the leadership? And it wasn't institutional preservation, it was power. It was power, and also the inability to follow their own canons. If they wanted to discipline a clergy person, you don't do it by publicly firing them the way they did. You have to have discipline and structure, and it wasn't done correctly. Yeah. In our humble opinion.
In our humble opinion. We got 16 stories we got to cover today. That means 3 minutes apart. We're already over time. I tell you that right now. Let's do some acronyms. Have united here. ACA reunites with the ACC. Anglican Church of America. Is that right?
Anglican Church in America.
In America.
Has now joined the Atlantic Coast Conference, and Duke, North Carolina, yes. Florida State. Yeah. I don't know if the ACA has a good enough basketball team to be worthwhile. No, Anglican Catholic Church. A press statement was put out on June 4th by the primate of the Anglican Church in America, saying they're reuniting with the Anglican Catholic Church. Kevin, I think you went to something in Atlanta a few years ago.
Yeah, I went to, it was a G4 or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Diocese of the Holy Cross, Anglican Church in America, Anglican Province of America, and the Anglican Catholic Church. We're working towards a common Eucharistic discipline, Eucharistic goals, fellowship. Now, since that time, and culminating in the 4th, 2 days ago, the announcement, the Anglican Church in America is now back in the Anglican Catholic Church. They've reunited, healing a former schism. The Diocese of the Holy Cross has joined the Anglican Catholic Church, leaving just the APA and the ACC. Now, one of the things we're finding is the APA, which is the healthiest of, in my opinion, healthiest of these four, is finding itself much closer to the Reformed Episcopal Church and to portions of ACNA than it is to its brothers in the continuing church movement. And one of the things Bishop Giffen is talking about is, well, maybe we can find a common pension plan. Maybe we can find something that in a generation will unite us more than just bishops, playing good buddy with each other. So it's not a done deal. All the different provinces, their standing committees and synods have to approve this. But we need to say, is this a merger like that of the United Reformed Church, where sure. dying churches form together to create a bigger dying church? So, or is it a mechanism for growth, vitality, and revitalization?
I hope for the latter, indeed. All right, we're going to move on to more stories here. June 3rd was Uganda Martyrs' Day. When I first went to Uganda, 2008, 2009, one of the special things I got to do on one of my tours was visit the site of the martyrs and the Anglican martyrs. And it's interesting that we have such a big celebration in Uganda over this all these years later, George.
It's a big deal. The Uganda martyrs, there were two sets of them. There were Anglicans and Roman Catholics who were executed by the king of Buganda, which is the sort of area around modern-day Kampala, and basically the driving force in Ugandan life. These new Christians were martyred for refusing the king's homosexual advances. I'm not...
No, that's true. Yeah.
What it is.
Yeah.
So if you ask the Ugandan church, why are they so strong on the gay issue? You know, their first martyrs, both Catholic and Anglican, were murdered, put to death, tortured to death for refusing to renounce their Christian faith and doctrine.
And none of them gave in. You know,
this took place in Namugongo, near Kampala, and now there's a shrine there. There are two. There's an Anglican one and a Catholic one, and they have a common date of celebration with two different churches, and you get hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of Ugandans pilgrims to these events. And you get the president of Uganda, it is the big pilgrimage festival for East African Christianity. You get all the Ugandan bishops, a lot of Kenyans and Rwandans and Tanzanians. I mean, the Ugandan police were on the lookout for terrorists, and in fact, they eliminated 2 terrorists with explosive vests who were going attempting to set off bombs in the middle of celebrations. The police neutralized that. Now, the Ugandan, Kevin, you remember when we got through security at the Dar es Salaam airport by waving a fistful of dollars, and I'm not talking the Clint Eastwood movie.
No. Yeah.
You know, we wanted to see the arrival of the Rowan Williams, who's going to be greeted by the Archbishop and the Vice President of Tanzania.
Yeah.
And maybe we don't look like Muslim terrorists, but we do look like we're wearing explosive vests under our clothing, or we were a little heavier then.
We were.
But all it took to get through was $10 here, $10 there.
Yeah.
Uganda doesn't work that way. There's still corruption in Uganda, plenty of it, but they take terrorism seriously, and they're working quite hard about it. My advice, unsolicited, to the Global South or to GAFCON, use massive pilgrimages like this and piggyback onto them.
Sure.
GAFCON conferences or Global South conferences, because when you have the 300 or 400, or in GAFCON it was 1,000 people joining them in Kampala and in the Kigali, if you include them in a 1 million man and woman pilgrimage and festival, for us fat foreigners, you can get us a bus with porta potties and little bottles of water, but the power of being among a fellowship of Christians like that, just the collective.
Symbolism.
I've been to places like this. I've been to the one down in Zimbabwe, the pilgrimage that draws people from all across southern Africa. And I got to tell you, there's something that happens when you're part of a pilgrimage with like-minded Christians. It's just a wonderful thing. And the closest we come in the Western world are to celebrations after the Eagles win the Super Bowl, because that's a once-in-a-lifetime thing, Kevin. But
yes, it is.
But that sense of camaraderie and common spirit.
Sure.
So, fellas, use the tools you have.
All right, let's move on to our next story. N.T. Wright has gone off script. He was on a recent podcast where he was speaking of Marcus Borg, and he said, you don't really need to believe in the bodily resurrection of Jesus Christ to be saved. Marcus Borg famously did not believe in all those things, and says, it's yes and no. So we're going to talk a little bit about N.T. Wright and his talk, but he also talked about abortion recently. And he said abortion is okay in some circumstances, the old slippery slope. And this is the year we're celebrating the 1700th anniversary of the Nicene Creed, which clearly lays out our faith. I think it's time to talk about N.T. Wright, George.
Well, N.T. Wright, as a scholar, I think is a brilliant man.
Absolutely.
He's been working on this new perspectives on Paul stuff. I haven't really been keeping up to it because it's not been that interesting to me, that sort of minutiae. But I've used his works in the past for Bible studies. I think he's a wonderful addition to the Christian world. But N.T. Wright suffers from what I call the Linus Pauling problem. Ooh, you're an expert in one area, doesn't mean you're an expert in another area. Wright, I actually met Wright when I was at Oxford as a student. He was a fellow, a visiting fellow at Merton College during my first year, and I was a graduate PhD student, and we would occasionally have lunch together. The older, he wasn't a fellow, so he couldn't sit at the big table, but he could sit at the littler tables. And Wright, very affable, very bright, generally nice man. I do like him as a person. He went off to Westminster Abbey that end of that year to be a canon in residence, and then he became Bishop of Durham. And after being rather a lackluster time as bishop, but who's a successful Church of England bishop these days, he went back to St. Andrews University, where he's been professor. And he recently did an interview with an Australian podcaster where they talked about Marcus Borg. Marcus Borg is the leader of one of the founders of the Jesus Seminar. Marcus Borg, a good Episcopalian, I should say. Member of the Episcopal Church of the USA. He's American. Borg doesn't believe in the bodily resurrection, doesn't believe that Jesus is God, doesn't believe most of the stuff that the Nicene Creed says you must believe. In many ways, he's sort of like Jordan Peterson, but coming at it from a different direction. He believed in the importance of God, but he couldn't believe in Jesus as God. Well, Wright was asked about this, and Wright basically was asked, do you think Borg would be saved? And he said yes, because Borg is a nice man.
Really? Okay.
And that he knew Borg, and he had only kind things to say, and that Borg had trouble. He had been brought up as a very severe sort of Lutheran, I think, Wisconsin Synod.
Oh, wow.
Lutheran,
Missouri Synod. Oof. Duh.
No, even more than that, the Wisconsin, which is the smaller, more severe.
Yes.
Except they have cheese with Holy Communion. No, they don't.
That's right.
So he had all these sorts of excuses, but it also ties into his talking about abortion, where abortion is wrong, it's murder. But, you need to make allowances for cases of rape and incest and this, that, and the other. And the Linus Pauling effect. Linus Pauling famously discovered vitamin C, but then went on to be a big noise in the anti-nuclear movement. You could listen to Linus Pauling because he was a scientist and he knew everything.
Yes.
But if you actually knew anything about the topics Pauling was talking about, you knew he didn't know what he was talking about. He just knew chemistry really well, but strategic policies, no, he didn't.
N.T. Wright, yeah.
God help anybody who had to have N.T. Wright as a pastor. Because the message to be given here is, whether it's about Marcus Borg being saved or abortion being okay, it's that do in the end what you feel is best. Do what is right. That, Jesus has all these standards. Yes, he said this. Yes, Paul wrote this. This is a man who's expert on Paul in Corinth, in Romans and other places, what you must do, what you must believe to be saved. And Borg,
Right.
It's just been a disappointment.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Borg. Wright has been. Borg was always a disappointment. Wright has been a disappointment. Now, you got to think, Wright makes his money by selling his videos and books and seminars on these various websites. And if there's any way you can kill your customer base, conservative evangelicals and traditionally minded people, is to adopt the arguments of the enemy in your worldviews.
Well, it's to give, he's giving the enemy fuel. Technically, do you need to believe in the absolute bodily resurrection of Jesus Christ to be saved. Well, the thief on the cross didn't. Okay, clearly, all right. Maybe not technically, but in the purpose of the growth of the church and the purpose of our redemption, yeah, it's pretty important that you believe in the physical, bodily resurrection of Jesus Christ, because if God can't overcome death, what the hell is the point to all this? Okay. Yeah. And yeah, I don't mean to be so blunt, NT, but you're just giving the enemy fuel here, because your video has spent 8 days going all over the internet, where people go, oh, maybe you don't have to believe that. If NT Wright says they don't have to believe it, not a big deal. And those people who are enemies of the right to life now have a little bit, NT Wright says if you've been raped, it's okay to create another victim and end the life of your child. You've just given your enemies more fuel and power, and that's not your role. Your role here as a Christian is to grow the church and to help shepherd. And you're not doing that here. You're feeling the wrong side.
We used to have a saying, I don't know if it's used anymore, about talking about eggheads. People who were smart in one area but just totally clueless about life. And it helps that he's balding, but N.T. Wright is an egghead. He is someone who should just stay in his own lane and not venture into areas where his academic expertise serves no purpose. He may have had pastoral experience, but he's never was a real long-term parish priest who had to deal with this sort of thing on an everyday basis, and who has to deal with how do you respond to these issues.
Maybe he's having
being in a loving way, but also in a doctrinally and scripturally correct way.
Maybe he's having Kevin and George issues. He's aging, okay? The memory's going, and I don't know. Because I've seen so many wonderful interviews with him on video and his writings and essays. I'm like, top notch. One of the greatest Pauline expositors there ever has been. But I don't know. I had an interview with N.T. Wright back at Yale in 2007 or 8, after Roland Williams had professed that it would be okay for England to have two types of laws, one Sharia and one UK based. And I sat down with N.T. Wright. We did an interview about this, and he said he's quite sure that Roland Williams regretted saying that. I hope that N.T. Wright comes out and says he regrets saying this and that he was just not being clear enough. There you go. So
this doesn't detract from his scholarship.
No.
I just wouldn't look to him for pastoral or personal advice.
All right, on to the next news story. We talked last week about naked chickens. Never thought I'd talk about that again. They're featherless, they're frivolic, and they have a purpose in the church, according to Bishop Mertz. Let's talk about a quick update at the cathedral, George.
Well, last week we told you about the cathedral in Paderborn had a service celebrating the 1250th anniversary of what the state of Westphalia. And part of the service was a dance troupe dressed in parachute pants, a la MC Hammer, without shirts, juggling plucked chickens dressed in diapers to the song Flesh is Flesh. Fleisch ist Fleisch. Basically mocking the Eucharist. Well, the Bishop Mertz of Paderborn said afterwards to their 20,000 people, I think the number was, within a day, signed a online petition denouncing this, asking for action. And Bishop Mertz's response was he must have studied under the Bill Clinton School of Apology, which was, "I'm sorry if you were offended by this," which is code word for saying, "Don't bother me, you stupid people who aren't sophisticated." Well, the lay Catholics in Paderborn are not taking this lightly. They've now filed suit in law courts against Bishop Mertz for failure to failure to guard the Christian faith. Now, I don't know how the German legal system works, whether you can do church stuff in courts, but the Germans like to tell people what to do, so maybe the Jesuits will want to tell the bishop what to do.
Well,
but the lay people in Germany who are faithful basically are saying, enough is enough already. We've put up, I think this year there was less than 20 people ordained to the priesthood in all of Germany, Catholic priesthood.
Wow.
And like in the 60s, it was averaging 500 or 600 a year. And the church is having people leave in droves. And I think the traditionally minded people in Germany are saying, enough is enough already. If we can't have a bishop stand up against naked chicken dances, then we might as well just go play golf on Sunday.
Yeah.
Because the faith is taught by our leaders in the church is gone.
Well, this isn't just a mistake. It's a mistake on a different level. You and I have watched mistakes. Okay, we came back from a Lambeth conference and found out they forgot to pay for the big blue tent. That was a mistake, an oversight. Oops, we're sorry. Checks are being written now. We paid the invoice. We'll get the receipt. Ouch. Okay, we blew it. This is a different type of mistake. This is allowing something naturally evil into your church to worship something other than the God you worship. It's a desecration.
We're not talking about MC Hammer parachute.
No, can't touch this. And so this is a different type of mistake, completely. And to the point where you have allowed evil into the presence of the Holy Church, you can't just say you're sorry. Somebody's got to get fired. Okay.
It can't just be the secretary who scheduled it. It's got to be somebody who had authority. Somebody
who did not do an investigation and said, chicken dance, we're having Kevin. He's going to do the chicken dance as a DJ. That's so cool. No. All right, let's move on to some more news. Greece and Egypt. Foreign ministers are seeking to resolve the St. Catherine's Sinai Seminary seizure. There's been a little bit of pushback since our reporting, George.
15-year-old monastery, St. Catherine's in the Sinai Desert. The Egyptian government announced that they were seizing the property and going to turn it into a museum and going to tuft out the 30-odd monks who live there. And the reasons were given, protection of a cultural asset, the monks can't keep it up, it's in a part of Egypt that is basically high terror risk and tourists go there, so on and so forth. Well, the Greeks, prompted by the Archbishop of Athens, the head of the Greek Church, blew a gasket because the monks are Greek Orthodox down at St. Catherine's. And we talked about this being a blow-up, and now the foreign ministers of the two countries are meeting to work out an agreement. And I am proud to say, Kevin, they're going to do the Episcopal solution.
Dennis Canon? Don't say Dennis Canon.
Dennis Canon will now be instituted for Coptic monastery or for Greek Orthodox monasteries in Egypt, meaning the property will be owned by the Egyptian government, but used by the church, but the church can't sell it. And in other words, the same sort of Dennis Canon. It's we have a lien on the title, even though we didn't go to the courthouse.
Yeah.
That's where it looks like it's headed.
Yeah. It's your church until you want to keep it. Until
you want to sell it or whatever.
Yeah. Oh, great. All right. Now our next story. Still follow up to the Smythe affair over in the UK. It looks like 7 clergy are to face charges over the investigation and what has happened since then. Welby, ironically, is not one of the 7. Maybe because he fell on a sword early and quit. But let's talk about the people who may be charged, George.
Well, 10 people were named in the Macon report as holding some sort of degree of responsibility and liability, one of whom was George Carey. And it was so ridiculous, it was just so obvious that this was the token archbishop to be sacrificed. Justin Welby, who actively participated in the cover-up, had knowledge, this and that, no penalty whatsoever. Joe Bailey Wells, no penalties whatsoever. George Carey, What was his connection? Well, he was the principal of Trinity College, Bristol, when John Smythe was a day student for one semester. Therefore, he had to know.
Guilty by association.
About all the, and there was hearsay that, well, I thought that somebody sent Carey a memo about this guy, and Carey says, I never got the memo. Mm-hmm. Well, they decided not to push against Carey because this would be dismissed out of hand. I mean, it was so ridiculously bad and so politically motivated. But they're going to keep the charges against 7 clergy for, not acting soon as they should have in the consequence to the John Smythe affair. But again, they're missing we're being offered sacrificial lambs rather than the real culprit perpetrators in the Episcopal hierarchy and ranks. Thabo Makgoba, the Archbishop of South Africa, was informed about this, did nothing. And now he's being touted as an outside candidate to be Canterbury. That would be joy to us because Makgoba's got a history of ignoring abuse, just as June Dolly Major.
Yes,
and the reports about how a priest who was raped by another priest, and Makgoba basically, go away, little girl, you're bothering me. Mm-hmm. Was this his attitude? He would be a joy. It would be another Catherine Jefferts Schori for George and Kevin if Makgoba took office. But I have to say, this is a non-story for me because you're going to have 7 people persecuted for what they did or didn't do, while the real people who should be held to account are once again let off scot-free.
Sure. And the victims who are on Twitter and on social media are still getting no recompense on this. This is,
another commission, another group. How many years? Basically, they're trying to. My wife used to work exclusively with veterans in their lawsuits against the Veterans Administration, till she left to become a full-time Sunday school and Christian education director.
All right, yeah.
Which she says is much more fulfilling than. But one of the VA's tactics is to wait out a veteran until they die. Delay, and once you're dead, your case is considered moot and you can't go forward. You can't fight it. And so the Church of England is adopting the Veterans Administration tactic of trying to wait these people out and hope they die and go away or get discouraged or become Catholics, and therefore we can say, well, it's nothing to do with us anymore. It's disgrace.
All right, on to our next story. Since the beginning of time, every kingdom has had slaves. Some kingdoms love to have slaves. Some kingdoms where it's just a necessary evil to grow our society. And some kingdoms just felt the shame of having slaves, but kept them anyway. One kingdom, England, led by its church, the Church of England, set off a spark that ended slavery in England, the first Western nation to do so. The Church Commission for the Church of England plans to give away $100 million, or pounds, I should say, for slavery reparations. However, there's laws and rules of law in England that may forbade that, George.
Yeah. The Critic magazine in England has been leading the charge along with Nigel Biggar, Lord Biggar, former professor at Oxford, saying that the Justin Welby plan to give £100 million in reparations for the Church of England's complicity into the slave trade is historically inaccurate and morally and legally indefensible. Mm-hmm. As you say, Kevin, it was the Church of England that led the charge against chattel slavery in the Western world. Yeah. It was the British West Africa Squadron who patrolled and stopped slaves being shipped from Africa to the Western Hemisphere, and Britain paid a huge sum to compensate slave owners when they freed all the slaves in their colonies. Now, the Justin Welby went on a woke apology tour, going to Jamaica and to West Africa and to India and other places to apologize for various things, for the British Empire, for the slave trade and this and that.
For being white. He apologized for being white.
For being white. Mm-hmm. Being white. For being a dork. I mean, all these stupid things. Well, the Critic magazine has raised the point that the charity commissioners may not lawfully give away £100 million of their money for a purpose not outlined in their charter or documents, which is to support the mission, ministry, and the clergy of the Church of England. To do this would violate the law to give $100 million. In fact, what they're talking about now is to set up a new charity to give £100 million to, which would then send the money out to various favored groups, which would all be stolen. We know how this works. In other words, if it goes to the West Indies, it would go to the cousins, nephews, and brothers of the various presidents who would appoint them as trustees. And, it's a joke. But I think the biggest news here is that there are finally people standing up in England to say, look, a lie is a lie is a lie. And no matter how much you want to paint this in woke colors, you cannot make us the villains in this situation. And you cannot take away £100 million designed to further the work of Christ in England to salve the conscience of hysterical late middle-aged liberals.
Mm-hmm. Next story. The IDF has struck, the Israel Defense Forces struck an Al hospital.
Al-Ali is the Episcopal Hospital in Gaza City. The hospital owned by the Episcopal Diocese in Jerusalem.
Right. 5 were killed, 30 wounded, and boy, do we have some press releases out there to discuss. Now, if you didn't watch the interview I just did with David Peligi, we talked about the conflict, the ongoing conflict, and this 2-year war now between Israel and Hamas. This is part of that. We have allowed, as human beings, a army to hide themselves within the citizenship that they're there to protect. They hide in the schools, the hospitals, they hide their armaments and missiles under children's beds, and we're allowing that. So there's a conflicting idea of are we going to allow Israel to fight back? What does the Church of England say, George?
Well, the Church of England, in the form of Stephen Cottrell, put out a press release that basically illustrates what a bumptious idiot Stephen Cottrell is. He put out a press release saying that there's no excuse for Israel to attack the Al-Aliyah hospital, and they need to prove every time that they are justified in doing this. And then I saw a press statement from the Diocese in Jerusalem condemning this attack as unwarranted, unmerited. 3 journalists were killed, and all this and that. Now, the first thing you need to know, if you're an Anglican reporter who's basically not trying to move on to greater things but wants to make this your field, you cannot trust a single thing the Diocese of Jerusalem says. Going from the Al-Aliyah hospital bombing, Israel deliberately targeted this hospital when it was Hamas rockets that fell onto the hospital. Sure. Back to I have a history with these people going back almost 30 years, and the Diocese of Jerusalem is pretty corrupt. Bishop Abu al-Assad.
We're not going to call the Diocese of Hamas, but if the shoe fits.
Well, the diocese is, it's a darling of Western Jew haters in the Christian world because it will trumpet the Hamas line. So diocese puts out a statement, all unmitigated war crimes, this and that. Bishop Cottrell puts out some statements which shows that the man is not that bright. But why don't we find out what the Israelis say? Well, I check Twitter. The Israelis have nothing in English, but if you go to their Hebrew side, you can read the Hebrew statement, which says that a Palestinian Islamic Jihad is using the Al-Aliyah hospital as a command and control center. And we deliberately targeted it when some of their leaders of Hamas came out from underneath the tunnels in the hospital they've dug, and we set the rockets flying to kill them in the parking lot in the yard of the hospital. And we used precision munitions, precision strike to take out these people. There was collateral damage. 30 people were wounded. 5 were killed, including a Hamas terrorist leader. But 3 journalists. You know who these journalists were, Kevin? It wasn't Christiana Amanpour or some, Jake Tapper or whatever. There were 3 Hamas, Palestinian Islamic Jihad propagandists. It's like saying, oh my goodness, you're trying to kill Joseph Goebbels. He's a journalist. That's just unfair. At the beginning of this conflict from October 7th, 2023, journalists working inside Gaza for Hamas have been participants and have been involved in the massacres and murders. We saw lots of video evidence of people wearing press vests, killing people, celebrating the murders, the rapes, the tortures of these people. And yes, they're journalists, they're their media spokesmen, but they're also complicit in the crimes of Hamas.
They're soldiers.
So Cottrell mouths off, says some stupid things. The diocese in Jerusalem continues to be a dhimmi church, totally, not completely, but heavily under the thumb. The bishop in Jerusalem, interestingly, does not sign this statement. So his hands are clean. He's not going to get, but whoever is running the inside show, they're going to tell a lie about Israel. And one of the few sane people, and maybe it's a blessing for England, is Guli Francis Decani, the Bishop of Chelmsford, one of the person at the bookmaker's top of the list with the next Archbishop of Canterbury, saying, oh, it's terrible that more people have died, and I wish the violence would stop, and I wish all Palestinians as Israel and Israelis can live in peace. Perfect statement. She denounces murder of all sorts, violence of all sorts. She doesn't lift up the Palestinians to be martyrs, like Stephen Cottrell, who's given Greta Thunberg a run for her money of being the most clueless leftist Westerner in this situation. But as I say, maybe it's just I'm getting old and cranky and it's Friday, so I'm mouthing off. But friends, whenever you see a story out of Israel,
double check it.
We'll check it.
Yeah,
Cottrell said, we need proof.
The cost to
Steve,
get proof? Oh my gosh.
Steve, baby, Hamas doesn't allow people to wander in and sort of check out. Do you have a missile silo here in this room? The hospital is not an occupied part of Gaza by the Israelis. How in the world do you expect to get sort of proof in the middle of a war? I don't know. I mean, maybe you get what you deserve, and if this is who the Archbishop of York is, God help him.
Let's move on to some other news. Marc Ardus of California, he's a retired bishop, right?
Bishop of California, which is San Francisco.
Yep. Has been suspended indefinitely. Now, let's just play the small world portion here. You have a connection. What's your connection with Mark?
Andrus was the curate at the Church of the Redeemer in Bryn Mawr, Pennsylvania, church where I grew up, where my up until the age of 10, when we moved to Florida. Church where I married my wife, Susan. Church where her family and most of her mother's friends all attend. Andrus started off his career as a curate at the Church of the Redeemer, and he was asked to leave at a certain point, and when he was asked to leave, the rector was fired by the diocese. And we never learned what it was, but it was a bit of a scandal, and Andrus disappeared down to a parish in Virginia.
Right.
Years later, the time comes for consents from the diocese to Andrus's election, and Andrus is a woke liberal, perfect for San Francisco.
Best thing going.
The Diocese of Pennsylvania refuses to give consent. Doesn't derail him, but the diocese that knew him best says, this guy this man should not be a bishop.
Sure.
So we're not told what the charges are. We're not told the gender of the person with whom he's had an ongoing improper affair. But the presiding bishop put out a statement yesterday, the 5th, saying that Andrus has agreed to suspension until such time as the presiding bishop feels that Andrus is sufficiently contrite and not a harm or a danger to others or abuse someone of his episcopal authority.
It's called an accord. They put together an accord.
Yeah. So the thing is, this doesn't come out of nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
This doesn't come out of nowhere, and we cannot say what the rumors were 30 years ago in the suburbs of Philadelphia, because we could be sued, because I can't prove a single thing.
Right.
Because all my friends who are witnesses are all dead.
There's clearly a story here. And
this is not a surprise.
Yeah. So interesting. All right. I was on Twitter/X the other day, and I saw a posting from ACNA2, that's ACNA TOO, that referred to a document on the ACNA website updating us on the Ruch trial that's coming up shortly. I went to the Anglican website, ACNA website, and I couldn't find that document there. So I sent you the story, and you said, what's going on here? What's going on, George?
Well, the ACNA put up a basically status of the case, what's happening, what the charges were, and they put this up on the ACNA's website. And I copied it. I haven't gotten around. I copied it from via command, Control C, and put it on a Word document to get around to, because it was, wasn't breaking news. It was just a background story. And then you sent me the link, and ACNA 2 says this press release from the Anglican Church in North America is inaccurate, and it cited half a dozen things. Now, ACNA 2 has had their knickers in a twist for a long time. They're a bit over the top in a lot of stuff, so I always like to check what they have to say.
They can be passionate, yes.
But the ACNA has now removed 2 of its breaking news stories in less than a month.
Yeah.
Calvin Robinson letter was taken down, where Archbishop Wood chastises Calvin Robinson for being un-Anglican. And the unchristian, and the description of the charges against Ruch were taken down by the ACNA, leading me to wonder: is there any truth in the accusations against the ACNA that made by ACNA 2 that Ruch is going to be whitewashed? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean,
it doesn't pass the smell test.
It doesn't. And here, the greatest thing the church can do, any church, is have full transparency. It's the model for a successful province, a successful diocese, and a successful church. No matter what, good news or bad news, we let people know what's going on. Because as we alluded to in our first story, God can use evil for good. And it would be really nice to, when it happens, to demonstrate it and show it, not hide it. And so we'll have to see. But being lack of transparent in these type of stories is not helpful, in my humble opinion. Let's talk here. We got too many stories to report. Which one should we pick up here for our last story, George?
A good news story. How about Chile?
Do it.
The Chilean parliament is looking at an abortion bill which would liberalize the country's abortion laws. Mm-hmm. And God bless the Anglican Church of Chile and their bishops. They're their own province now. They've been growing very well. They were led to this point by Tito Zavala. I think he's still Archbishop. Pretty sure he's still Archbishop. Yeah. Hasn't retired yet. But they have released an open letter stating that life begins at conception, that abortion is contrary to God's law, natural law, and we cannot allow abortion just as a form of birth control and convenience. So here are the bishops of Chile giving N.T. Wright lessons on Christian morality. And friends, I got to tell you, the bishops of Chile have the arguments, and N.T. Wright's squishy liberalism doesn't.
No,
so
doesn't.
The statements on Anglican Inc., you can look at it for yourself. Whether the Chilean government will take any heed, I don't know. But within the wider Anglican world, this is a wonderful addition for for the literature of Anglicans for Life, for instance, in the United States, or within the Church of England, for those fighting the abortion battle, to see that they are not alone and that their views are shared by Anglicans from around the world.
Yeah. And they will not let their enemies have power, which is very important. All right, you've watched another episode of Anglican Unscripted. I'm Kevin Kallsen.
And I'm George Conger, and you've been watching episode 918 of Anglican Unscripted.